This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. The region is scrambling to ease potential energy shortfalls. Japan taps deeper into its oil reserves, while South Korea forms emergency economic teams and implements vehicle restrictions. Oil prices drop sharply in the hope of peace after President Trump said that Washington was negotiating with Tehran. And Asia's answer to Davos, China's Boao Forum focusing on supply chain disruption, the blocked Strait of Hormuz, and key AI breakthroughs. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong is among those attending. A Belarusian President, Alexander Lukashenko, arrives in North Korea for his first official visit, seeking to deepen ties between the two Russian allies that both helped Moscow's war in Ukraine. Also in the bulletin, the power of Japanese mascots on full display at this annual competition that's attracting attention from fans to businesses looking to win hearts and to win cash. Rather, to cash in on an industry worth billions. The worsening energy crisis triggered by the war on Iran is rippling across East Asia as governments boost preventive measures to mitigate the impact. Well, Japan, which holds some of the world's largest oil reserves, is tapping deeper into its stockpiles. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi says that Tokyo plans to release more from its reserves and draw on joint stockpiles held with Gulf nations. Now, Japan relies on the Middle East for about 95% of its oil. South Korea is forming two new emergency economic teams to respond to the situation. President Lee Jae-myung will lead a separate emergency economic meeting that will direct both teams. One will be set up in Cheongwade, or the Blue House, and the other will be under Prime Minister Kim Min-suk's office. Mr. Kim says it is time to strengthen preemptive measures and prepare for worst-case scenarios. Now, to cope with potential energy shortfalls, a 5-day vehicle restriction system will be enforced across the public sector starting today. Vehicles will be barred from the roads 1 day each week based on license plate numbers. Other government-led conservation recommendations include taking shorter showers and charging mobile phones during the day. Well, South Korea is heavily dependent on energy exports, with nearly 70% of its supply passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, China's foreign ministry says that Beijing is ready to strengthen global coordination and cooperation to jointly address energy security concerns. Well, I've got Ross Cullen for CNA, and he joins us live from Turkey's border with Iran. So, Ross, first up, how has Tehran responded to the United States' latest proposal to end the war?
Hi, Oteli. The Iranian regime has refused the idea that there are talks going on. It says that there have been no such negotiations with the United States. Now, this might be a front potentially for a domestic audience without admitting that there are back-channel negotiations going on. We know that Turkey, for one example, has been in contact to see if there is this possibility of face-to-face negotiations between Washington and Tehran in Pakistan. But Iran says it's going to continue fighting until it has achieved total victory over the United States and Israel. It has also announced the easing of some of its restrictions regarding shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz.
And Ross, the Turkish border, where you are at right now, any updates on that? I mean, what's the situation where you are at?
Yeah, well, it's cold and wet up here in the mountains between Turkey that way and Iran. Behind the border gate, you can see behind me, and we do have a steady stream of people coming through from Iran. Also, people are going into Iran that way. There are people coming here who want to escape the war. There are also people coming for actually planned travel that they wanted to come anyway. There are some people taking vacations in the city of Van, further up the road, which has Turkey's largest lake, for example, a real draw for people in the region. Some people are also using Van as a transit hub. So they are fleeing the war. They're coming into Turkey, going onto the city of Van, which has an airport. And from there, they can fly to Istanbul. And Turkish Airlines there flies to almost every country in the world. So we're seeing a lot of people then choosing to move on, perhaps into the diaspora, people who are traveling to the United Kingdom, to Canada. I've spoken to people who are traveling to France and to Qatar as well. So people are coming in. And it's a calm, I would say, calm situation at the moment. There's no real kind of influx of millions of refugees as people might have thought. There's also people who are choosing to go back into Iran to see family and to try to get back to work.
Thanks for that update, Ross Cullen for CNA at Turkey's border with Iran. Well, it's been nearly a month into the Iran war, and humanitarian organizations such as Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, warn of the urgent need to protect civilians as health facilities come under strain. CNA's Yasmin Yonkers discussed the severity of the crisis with MSF's international president, Dr. Javed Abdulmonem.
It's really quite alarming. I mean, this escalation happened practically overnight, and it's across tens, if not 15 countries. Actually, if you look at Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way to the eastern Mediterranean coast. We're seeing the largest impact in Lebanon, as your report just said, with over 1 million people displaced. This is in the context of widespread evacuation orders from the Israeli military, serial aerial bombardments in civilian areas, and also attacks on healthcare. Some 50 or just over 50 hospitals have been attacked now, and emergency medical response teams too, causing deaths. So that's an alarming pattern. That sounds familiar to what we've all seen happening in Gaza, and you can imagine then if there are 1 million people imperiled, it's really worrying.
Yeah. In the case of Lebanon, it's not just mass displacement, Doctor. It's families forced to flee again and again. What does that kind of repeated uprooting do to people's ability to access even the most basic health care?
Indeed. I mean, we've seen all of this some 15 months ago in Lebanon. This is a country that has a population, about 3/4 of the population that live below the poverty line. So it's a fragile population and fragile healthcare system. The sheer violence and the evacuation orders have meant in a large swathe that the health system is inaccessible. So what we've had to do is move mobile medical clinics to the population. So we have 12 teams around the country. It's been a nationwide response just in these last 3 weeks. But also imagine that many are not in shelters and are homeless. So we've had to distribute food packages, we've had to distribute blankets and bedding, but also drinking water.
Drinking water, this one I have to ask you about, because we know that at some point temperatures are going to rise in the Middle East. There's growing concerns about all this water access, especially if critical infrastructure becomes hit. So how quickly could this then, the lack of water, become a second compounding humanitarian crisis?
Oh, well, listen, I mean, water, you need water before you need food and shelter in a classic humanitarian response. So it's urgent and almost immediate when you have a large number of people displaced. Don't forget that also without effective hand washing, without safe and treated drinking water, you have a large increase in transmissible infectious diarrheas. You also have airborne diseases and so forth. So water is critical for life. And that's why in most of our responses, we always take care of that part too. Thankfully, we haven't seen that yet in Iran. We've been running, since before the war in Iran, 3 small clinics for marginalized and excluded populations. But because of the overt violence there in South Tehran with continued airstrikes, we've not been able to keep that clinic open at this time, whereas in the other 2 cities they are.
You talk about scaling up MSF's facilities in these conflict regions. Does anything to do with the tough oil prices right now bother you, and what concerns do you have?
The concerns that we have are that, you can see that there's a potential for a global shock here. And it's not just in fuel prices, but it's also in potential for fertilizer, urea, and global food production. That's slightly further away. More immediately for us is that we're working in all these countries already. We already have projects for excluded, marginalized and dependent populations in Iraq, in Syria, in Jordan, in Palestine, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan and in Iran. And so for us, it's been the movement of supplies that have been disrupted, the movement of staff, and actually just keeping staff safe.
And Doctor, you've worked in crises from Sierra Leone to Haiti, a long resume you have. What concerns you now most about how the world responds to conflicts like this, particularly when it comes to maintaining humanitarian access and long-term attention?
Absolutely. I think we're at a period of time now where it feels that the norms, the adherence to laws which should protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, particularly healthcare, in times of conflict, are being increasingly ignored. With no accountability for that. So we've seen systematic attacks and destruction of the healthcare system in Gaza by Israel. We see attacks in Sudan by both warring parties. We now see attacks in Lebanon. The Iranian Red Crescent is reporting multiple health facilities attacked in Iran. It goes on. The right to healthcare, the access to healthcare, the safety of civilians in conflict is paramount. Even war has rules, and those rules seem to be increasingly abandoned.
And despite rules perhaps not being followed and the number of crises around the world mounting, are you having trouble attracting people to come and work with your organization? Because it's potentially getting even more dangerous.
It does feel like it's getting more dangerous with the attacks on healthcare I've described. I think, thankfully, the world's spirit, the spirit of every one of us, that solidarity, the urge to want to do something is present, ever present. And I don't think we have a recruitment problem at the moment, but of course we have to put in more stringent measures to make sure that our staff are safe. And that gets more difficult when the framework for that safety, the laws, are being abandoned.
Back to the work of the MSF, it's warned that health facilities are under severe strain. You're telling me all about it here. Based on your experiences in places like Syria and Gaza, what actually happens to a healthcare system when it's pushed to this point?
Well, what happens is, usually the healthcare system will pivot and try to meet the biggest need in front of you. And if there's mass violence against civilians, then it'll be trauma care and surgical care. What can then happen is that, particularly with a displaced population, but also displaced health services, is that maternal care, child care, vaccinations, mental health care, and even chronic disease care stops or is very, very much reduced or interrupted. So you have the secondary effects of conflict well beyond injuries and deaths. You have all this other illness and what we call excess deaths, more deaths than would have happened had the health service not been disrupted.
Well, meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has reportedly said that Tehran expects members of the UN Security Council to prevent the U.S. from misusing the Council by taking a firm stance to condemn the U.S.-Israeli offensive in Iran. Well, his remarks come after his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi called on parties in the ongoing Middle East conflict to seize all opportunities to start peace talks as soon as possible. Now, he made the remarks in a phone call with Mr. Araghchi. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Mr. Wang told Mr. Araghchi that, quote, talking is always better than fighting. And hotspot issues should be resolved through dialogue and negotiation. Beijing added that a protracted war serves no party's interests. He warned that a continued escalation could spill over, which would impact regional and international peace and stability. And for more on the war in Iran and what governments and companies are doing to cope, you can always head to our website, cna.asia, and our mobile app. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Asian refiners hunting globally for replacement barrels as Middle Eastern crude becomes just too expensive. Plus, we speak to maritime experts about how the Iran conflict is reshaping global shipping at the Asia-Pacific Maritime Conference in Singapore. Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and we've got Henry Yin standing by with the very latest in business news. Henry, oil prices yet again, that's what we're going to be talking about. How are the markets reacting after President Trump signaled progress with Iran?
Yeah, we are seeing oil rally taking a breather after those comments. and prices have eased on hopes of talks. But traders remain cautious, warning this could be another false start toward peace. And oil prices dropping sharply on reports the U.S. has sent Iran a 15-point proposal aimed at ending the war, raising prospects for an ease up in supply disruptions. Checking Brent at the moment, down by more than 5%, while WTI slightly below $88 per barrel level over there. President Trump indicated Iran is keen to reach a peace agreement, despite Iran denying direct talks. But there are hopes that more crude supply could be restored. On reports, Iran may allow what it calls non-hostile vessels to transit the Strait of Hormuz. This follows earlier moves by the U.S. to temporarily waive sanctions on Russian and Iranian oil already at sea. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke by phone with U.S. President Donald Trump. Mr. Modi condemned the attacks on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz as the two discussed the importance of keeping the waterway open. The strait is responsible for 40% of India's crude oil imports. And the world's largest energy conference is underway, with top oil executives warning of the long-term damage to crude supply. Shell CEO warned that the supply disruption that has hit Asia could creep into Europe next month. Well, the head of Kuwait's Petroleum Corporation said it will take the Gulf months to restore full of oil output when the war ends. And Austria's OMV CEO Alfred Stern said the war in Iran could reduce global energy supplies more than Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Meantime, Asian refiners are now paying an eye-watering $160 a barrel for crude that avoids the Strait of Hormuz. It comes as buyers scramble for alternative supplies to keep diesel and jet fuel production running. Prices for Dubai crude have surged more than 150% in 2026. By contrast, Brent crude is up about 64% this year and is trading at $10 premium over US WTI. Traders say that gap reflects geography. WTI is simply too far from Asia's biggest demand centers. Refiners are now hunting globally for replacement barrels as Middle Eastern crude becomes too expensive. Supplies from Norway, Russia, Colombia, even the US are being diverted to Asia, where premiums are highest. Well, the disruption has already cut 16 million barrels a day from global supply, according to JP Morgan. Experts say even with stockpile releases and pipeline flows improving, the world could still face a 10 million barrel daily shortfall. And the squeeze is already hitting consumers. Fuel prices are climbing sharply across Asia, up nearly 20% in China and Japan, more than 12% in South Korea, and as much as 50% higher in the Philippines and Cambodia compared to pre-war levels. It's not just petrol. Natural gas prices are rising too, pushing up household energy bills. Gas is also key for fertilizer, raising the risk of higher food prices. And Asia depends heavily on Gulf oil, and about 90% of Iran's crude exports go to China. And that oil feeds global supply chains. So as crude prices climb, consumers worldwide could soon feel it, and in everything from fuel to everyday goods. And meantime, U.S. crude remains cheaper, weighed down by higher shipping costs and concerns Washington could curb exports to protect domestic supply. As Gulf Arab oil producers from Saudi Arabia to Iraq cut production and look for new routes that bypass the strait, Iran, on some measures, is conducting business as usual. Well, roughly 2,000 ships are stalled. Iranian-flagged or affiliated vessels are still traversing the waterway. And Iran instead has told the UN Security Council that non-hostile vessels now can transit the critical choke point if they coordinate with Iranian authorities. That marks a shift after a rapid escalation late last month. On February the 28th, hours after US and Israeli strikes, Iran's Revolutionary Guard issues radio warnings and no ships would be allowed to pass. And on March the 2nd, a senior official of the IRGC confirmed that the strait was closed. And 2 days later, reports emerged that Iran would allow Chinese vessels to bypass through the strait. And daily transits by non-Iranian ships, mostly Chinese, Indian and Pakistani flag vessels, have dropped into the single digits since then. And the number of vessels transiting through the strait saw an obvious increase from last week. On March the 16th, 8 vessels, not including ships flying the Iranian flag, were detected in the waterway. Well, the number of transits was nearly double the numbers seen in the recent days, according to Windward. And data from tanker tracking firm Kepler show that tankers loaded an average of about 2.1 million barrels per day of oil, of Iranian crude in particular over the past 6 days, compared with around 2 million barrels a day in February. While the ripple effects of the Strait of Hormuz crisis are part of the conversation at the Asia-Pacific Maritime Exhibition and Conference on now here in Singapore, experts are discussing the impact on global shipping routes and operational costs. The incoming CEO of Mitsui O.S.K. Lines, Jataro Tamura, spoke about the industry's key concerns.
As a direct impact, we were concerned about the safety now. Yeah. So the geopolitics and as an impact, then safety, that's something we have to deal with now. Yeah. And there's a price for it. And well, eventually it will be managed through the market mechanism. So long-term maritime continues, but then short-term turbulence, we will have a couple of years to adjust this, then see how it works.
Well, the Chief Commercial Officer of Norwegian multinational maritime group, V. Helmsen, spoke to CNA and said the impact of the Strait of Hormuz crisis could echo what was seen in the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think the worst case scenarios here is the lumpy supply chains, if that's a word that makes any sense. During COVID, we saw the container ship market completely grind to a complete halt because the demand was simply not there. Then as the demand picked up again and people started to buy online, all of a sudden you had an enormous surge in demand, but not enough supply. And that created a lag in the market, which is until today not resolved. And that also goes for the fuel market, so the clean petroleum products, naphtha, gasoline, etc. That demand redistribution has taken 4 or 5 years. So we've seen a very high level of rates, charter rates for clean petroleum product ships. And now we're seeing that for VLCCs, and we're going to see it spread across the entire shipping cluster. That will drive inflation, it will drive delays, it will cause shortages potentially in food supply, food security, because there's not fertilizers enough, because there's no oil to make the fertilizers, and all of that will have a massive impact on the world. And in Asia, we are consumers of 80% of the oil that comes out of the Hormuz normally, and that's significant.
Concerns are also growing over the toll on seafarers operating in high-risk zones, with experts saying more needs to be done to support those on the front lines.
These seafarers are now running out of water, they're running out of food. We need to really start building the ability to get humanitarian aid across. So we're going to have a discussion, we're going to start talking to organizations, whether corporate way we can do it. There's a company called Mercy Ships, which actually looks at trying to create floating hospitals and getting people across. Lots of these areas need to be actually looked at in order to help the seafarers in a very practical way. Secondly, individuals need to actually start realizing that these people are so vital for their own global good that they need to start treating them like they would treat the essential workers or the military. They are as important to us as they are. So attitude change is what we can bring. Humanitarian aspects need to be brought in, aid needs to be brought in, some kind of government discussion needs to happen where people can say, let us try and take these ships away from the danger zone.
A unit of Hong Kong conglomerate CK Hutchison has escalated its legal battle with Panama. Well, Panama Ports Company raising its damages claim to more than $2 billion in an international arbitration case. The subsidiary filed the expanded claim under International Chamber of Commerce rules just 1 month after local authorities took control of key terminals near the Panama Canal. The company is alleging unlawful seizure of assets and restricted access to critical data during the takeover, saying it has suffered from Panama's year-long attack campaign against the company. The dispute came after Panama cancelled the company's concessions to terminals it has been operating since 1997. The move in line with a Supreme Court ruling that its contracts were unconstitutional, while the legal tussle is taking place amid U.S. pressure to curb Chinese influence around the strategic waterway, which handles about 5% of global maritime trade. It's also casting a shadow over CK Hutchison's planned $23 billion sale of its ports business stake to a consortium led by BlackRock and Mediterranean Shipping Company, with talks still ongoing. Panama has granted temporary 18-month concessions to keep the terminals operating. Shares of CK Hutchison closed higher after the news. And that's all for business. Back to you, Ateli.
Thanks so very much for that, Henry. Well, on that note, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, leaders gather in China's Hainan province for the Boao Forum for Asia against the backdrop of an energy crisis amid the expanding conflict in the Middle East. This is East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Japan taps deeper into its oil reserves, while South Korea forms emergency economic teams as the region scrambles to ease potential energy shortfalls caused by the war on Iran. Oil prices dropped sharply in the hope of peace after President Trump said that Washington was negotiating with Tehran, even as Iran denies direct talks. And leaders gather in China's Hainan province for the Boao Forum that is expected to focus on supply chain disruption, the blocked Strait of Hormuz, and key AI breakthroughs. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong is among those attending. And CNA senior China editor Olivia Xiong, she joins us live from the forum in Boao. So, Olivia, the crisis in the Middle East threatening to overshadow this forum. What do you think the impact is going to be like?
Well, Ateli, it's been a packed day of discussions, not much explicit discussion about the Middle East situation, but certainly several mentions of an uncertain global environment. And the organizers here at the Boao Forum positioning the event as a champion for stability under this year's theme of new dynamics, new cooperation, new opportunities. There was a panel earlier today specifically discussing how to inject certainty in an uncertain world. And in his remarks, the Secretary General of the forum made a veiled swipe at the US, calling for a strong message to be sent that power politics and hegemony will not prevail, also calling for regional cooperation in Asia to be strengthened.
We have to understand that our future is in our own hands. And we have to understand well that no country can place itself above the world. Such ways as tariff, as military coercion, cannot solve the problems, cannot make countries great in a sustainable way.
Well, this yearly forum has been described by some over the years as Asia's answer to the World Economic Forum's gathering in Davos. And this year, over 2,000 participants from about 60 countries and regions are expected to attend, including government leaders, executives from local and global firms, as well as members of academia. Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong expected to deliver a keynote speech on Thursday. The Middle East situation, though, affecting the participation of some, as we have seen the Secretary General of the forum saying that this is understandable. Notably, South Korea's Prime Minister Kim Min-seok cancelling his trip to China, as he says he wants to focus on the impact of the Iran conflict and the impact of that is having back at home on the economy and livelihoods. But he will be joining the forum via video link. Ateli.
So this year's forum in particular, what exactly is the key message that China wants to deliver this time around?
Well, I'll tell you, the Boao Forum has often been used as a platform by China to explain its domestic policies to a global audience. And we can certainly expect that to continue, as we are expecting China's #3 ranking official, Zhao Leji, who is also the head of the Chinese legislature, to deliver a speech at a plenary session on Thursday. And now this comes amid a wider charm offensive that we've seen by China just a few weeks after it concluded its most important annual political meetings, where it also unveiled a new 5-year plan. Over the weekend, we saw top global executives attend a gathering in Beijing, where the Chinese Premier Li Qiang also pledged that China would be a stable economic force amid global uncertainty. This also comes as China is seeking to woo foreign investment that has gone down by 5.7% year-on-year in January and 9.5% last year. And so today we saw former Chinese officials in discussions hailing the merits of China's huge market and the talent pool, and that encouraging foreign firms to invest and saying that it could be an export destination for many countries. Businesses I've been speaking to and at the panel sessions have been saying that, yes, they do see opportunities, but challenges as well.
We talk about the overall ecosystem and talk about the value chain. We talk about the supply chain. Some of the leading companies are talking about innovation chain. They're looking into how, at what stage, to tap into the innovation space. They know the engineer advantage of China. They're also looking into the source of innovation.
It's a fast-paced market. Things are changing very rapidly, so showing up matters in terms of business leaders being here, grasping the evolution of different policies, understanding what are going to be the priorities, making sure that they're ready to compete. So, we see great opportunities, but it's also going to require a lot of hard work.
So opportunities and challenges abound. China, clearly trying to pivot to become this global innovation leader. But this transition, is it apparent to everybody at Boao?
I'll tell you the short answer is yes. If we were to step inside the exhibition hall, you would see many exhibits relating to future industries that China is keen to push, from space to AI to robotics. And I had the chance to sit down with one of the newer players in the robotics field, Ace Robotics, even though its chairman is no stranger to the AI field, he's also the co-founder of AI firm SenseTime. And here's a quick look at our discussion.
The Ace Robotics got established, and some investors also has a hesitation. They think we already invest a lot of embodied AI companies, and it's kind of late and to come to this sector. Then we explain that the human-centric data collection and the world model, and they suddenly understand, this is a game-changing, is very different from the previous way of develop the brain of robotics.
But when do you expect embodied AI, humanoid robots to move beyond the pilot or demonstration phase to large-scale deployment?
Now these robots, and they can dancing and boxing and do the entertainment, and but if we ask the robots to do some work for us is quite challenging. It's because the robots doesn't really understand the physical environment. We expect in the coming 2 years, and we can accumulate 10 million hours data for the training of humanoid robotics, and then we can see the intelligence of the humanoid robotics. We will have the big improvement. At that point, we call that kind of a DeepSeek moment or ChatGPT moment because we have a certainty that even we further increase the data, let's say we increase to 1 billion hours and further increase the size of the model, and we can get the benefits, and that's the meaning of the scaling law. But right now we are still not there yet. We don't know how to scale the data, how to enlarge the model size. Even we make the model very large, and because of the lack of data, lack of the diversity of the data, we cannot get the benefit.
With embodied AI now part of China's new 5-year plan, how is that affecting Ace Robotics' strategy moving forward?
It means that we have more industrial verticals and scenarios to really make the robotics can have the value for the production, to improve the efficiency, to have this instead of just a demo. And we also have the very clear plan in the coming 5 years. At this moment, we have the spatial intelligence. The robots can move around, so can get into the security, energy, tourism, these verticals. But in the next 2 years, and we're going to the retail and the service area, commercial service area, and 5 years, and we go into the family, to the home.
What bottlenecks or challenges are still in the way?
You have to kind of make sure it's safe. So it's better to start with some verticals in the 2B areas to have the specific task for robots, and then people have enough confidence, and then directly sell to the robots to see and to the end customer.
Ace Robotics also talking about expanding its global footprint, another key theme that we've been seeing among Chinese firms here at the Boao Forum today. But for now, back to you, Telly.
Hey, thanks for the good work, Olivia. CNA's China Senior Editor Olivia Xiong in Boao. Now, observers say Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's presence at the Boao Forum shows that Singapore is reinforcing ties with China, even while staying engaged with partners across Asia. They add that it reflects Singapore's approach of maintaining strong relationships across major economies, even as the global environment becomes more complex. Rebecca Mateo has more from Hainan.
Touching down on the tropical island, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong was received by Chinese officials. Singapore and China share long-standing ties, spanning trade, investment, and government-to-government cooperation. These include projects such as the Suzhou Industrial Park and the Chongqing Connectivity Initiative, as well as frequent high-level exchanges. Analysts say Mr. Wong's trip to the island for the Boao Forum is seen as a sign of the importance of the relationship.
I think, of course, there might be the occasional disagreements on certain issues, but this is natural because there are very few countries in the world that align perfectly on all issues. In fact, I don't think it exists. So the fact that Singapore Prime Minister has been invited to deliver the keynote speech there indicates Singapore's relationship with China is actually very mature, very strong.
Mr. Wong's visit also comes at a time of ongoing tensions between China and Japan. But observers say Singapore's approach has remained consistent to maintain strong working relationships across major economies, guided by its own national interests. Analysts say Singapore does not view its relationships through a zero-sum lens and seeks to engage all partners instead.
This effort, this attempt to make friends all around. It's not just a visit to Japan. PM Wong also hosted President Lee from South Korea not too long ago. Singapore has a lot of reason to work well with the various Northeast Asian partners and also partners around the globe. But the fact that our partners aren't getting along with each other makes that proposition a lot more difficult to realize.
But as global tensions rise and competition among major powers deepens, Singapore may find it increasingly challenging to navigate competing interests.
It's a more difficult environment. That doesn't mean that Singapore will stop trying. I guess the question will be, what's the next step? If we are looking at a more restrictive trading and investment environment. What will Singapore do to prepare ourselves for that kind of a future, even as we hope that things will open up again? So that bit is a little bit less clear.
Observers say Singapore is not looking to act as a go-between major powers, but to put forward its own position and stay engaged with all sides. Prime Minister Wong has made the point that Singapore looks to work with like-minded countries to uphold the rules-based order in a more uncertain environment. Mr. Wong will be giving a keynote speech at the opening plenary of the forum tomorrow. Rebecca Mateo, CNA, Hainan.
Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, some of Japan's biggest stars are turning small towns into global attractions. And South Korea's own superstars drawing millions of viewers worldwide over the weekend. A Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, has arrived in North Korea for his first official visit at the invitation of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Mr. Lukashenko is expected to hold talks with Mr. Kim during the two-day trip that Belarusian state news agency Belta says is aimed at deepening ties and to identify areas of mutual interests and cooperation. Mr. Kim, in a letter to Mr. Lukashenko earlier this month, said that he is willing to expand and develop better relations with Belarus, in line with the demands of what he calls a new era. The two nations are united by Western sanctions against them, accusations of rights violations, and warm ties with Russia. Both have provided assistance to Moscow for its war in Ukraine. Pyongyang dispatching ground troops and weapons, and Minsk serving as a launch pad for Russia's invasion in 2022. Kim Jong-un, meanwhile, reiterated North Korea's unwavering support for Russia in response to a congratulatory message sent to him by President Vladimir Putin for his reappointment as head of North Korea's highest policy-making and governing body. Seoul has taken into custody an alleged drug lord accused of running a narcotics ring in South Korea from a Philippine prison. Now, Park Kwang-yul was extradited under a temporary treaty clause to allow South Korea to investigate his alleged criminal activities. Park was accused of operating a smuggling ring that brought in large quantities of illegal narcotics and of conspiring with accomplices to distribute the drugs in South Korea. He was serving a 60-year sentence for triple homicide in the Philippines. The South Korean president, Lee Jae-myung, has thanked his Philippine counterpart, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., for granting his request for the extradition made during their meeting in Manila earlier this month. South Korean Justice Ministry and police officials declined to comment on the scale or value of Park's alleged drug trade, though local media reported that the amount of narcotics distributed a month had a street value of $20 million. Now, K-pop megastar BTS drew some 18.4 million viewers worldwide during their comeback concert last weekend. The live stream hosted on Netflix easily topped weekly charts in dozens of countries and debuted in the top 10 in 80 countries. Well, the total viewer count combines real-time audiences and those who watched within a day of the broadcast. The 7-member band took to the stage in Seoul's Gwangmunan Square for the first time in nearly 4 years, and it drew more than 100,000 fans to the center of the South Korean capital to catch the first performance of BTS's new album, Arirang. The live stream was part of a revival plan for BTS. Netflix is scheduled to release a behind-the-scenes film chronicling the making of their latest album, while the members gear up for a worldwide tour that analysts say could generate as much as $2 billion in sales. Well, taking you to Japan now, I want you to meet the kings of the country's kawaii culture, the yurikara, or mascots. It is, in fact, a multi-billion-dollar industry that spawned business empires, put lesser-known attractions on the world map, and also won hearts. Well, CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida gets up close with some of its biggest stars.
From the cute and cuddly to the wacky and weird, Japan has thousands of mascots, each representing and promoting a different vision, event, or cause. Known as yurukara in Japanese, they even gather for a grand showdown every year, where they appeal to fans and go head-to-head for a shot at fame and fortune. A national competition to select Japan's most popular local mascot was launched in 2011. Its purpose was to boost regional economies and foster a positive vibe after the devastation wrought by the deadly Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that year. Since this competition has seen participation by companies. Watapi was among some 300 mascots that took part last year. It was created about a decade ago to promote a Nagano-based retail chain and has been climbing up the popularity rankings since.
ワタファンのスーパーマーケットを知らない方もワタピーきっかけに当グループを知っていただけてるっていうとても優秀な販売パートナーです。
The most successful mascots can generate immense publicity and revenue for the brands they represent.
1回目がですね、まさにくまモンが優勝をして、そこから毎回優勝してきたキャラクター、実は自治体のキャラクターさんだったんですね。コロナを経て新しく我々ユルバースという言葉で大会をまた仕切り直してイベントをやってますけれども、企業のキャラクターがすごく増えてきている。
Wide-eyed, rosy-cheeked Kumamon is a celebrity in the mascot world and can be spotted everywhere on arrival in Kumamoto Prefecture, its home turf. Its presence and influence loom large. Many foreign visitors come here off the usual tourist trail just to meet Kumamon. And sales of merchandise adorned with its image add up to some $10 billion US.
2014年1年間では1627億円で、2010年にデビューしました。で2011年から2024年までの累計が1兆6222億円という、もうすぐ2兆円、今度海外にも力を入れてよりこの上に伸ばしていきたいと思っています。
Merchandise sales aren't the goal. Promoting Kumamoto is, which is why the government division dedicated to Kumamon's management allows the use of its image for free, as long as it's to market the prefecture or local products. Kumamon is also going places as the global ambassador for the region.
フランスとの交流ですね、これは来年度ももちろん続けていきたいというふうに思っておりますし、東アジア、東南アジアでやっていきたいということで、今年度からはですね、くまモンワールドツアー、くまモンというキャラクターが15年経ちましたけど、100年後も愛されるキャラクターとして成長していけるようにですね、引き続きちょっと頑張っていきたいなというふうに思っております。
The breakout mascot star last year was Myaku Myaku, the multi-eyed face of the Osaka World Expo that became a cultural icon of sorts, spawning collaborations and bringing in some $800 million US as of end of October. With mascot mania going strong, there's no shortage of characters jostling to follow in their footsteps. But few really make it big.
新しいキャラクター実はどんどん生まれてくるんですけれども、一方でずっと活動を続けてるんだけれども、途中でなかなか続けていけない。それは予算の面もあれば人の面もありますし、ファンの心をいかにつなげていくかっていうところも難しさがあってですね。
It's to be seen whether these kawaii characters waiting in the wings will shoot to superstardom or fade into obscurity. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
And that wraps up Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And find us on all our socials, including Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.